Good evening and welcome to episode 402 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zamantungwa Khumalo. It's a Friday edition of the Private Property Podcast. If you join us for the first time, welcome to the family. You're tuned into the only daily property show in South Africa, catering to your property needs. And of course, to our regular viewers, whether you watch us on Facebook, on Instagram, or on YouTube, welcome to it. You know how we do. Every single weekday, you and I have an appointment at 7 p.m. where I'm always in conversation with a property expert who helps us navigate our property journey. And of course, there are also great shows that you can watch across our social media pages every single weekday at 8 p.m. As it is a Friday, you can catch Chad on the Home Shoppers Show, and he's on your screens on Monday at the same time. And he always takes us through exquisite properties that you can find on www.privateproperty.co.za. And you can catch the Farming Podcast with the award-winning farmer Umbalini for every Tuesdays and Thursdays, where she takes us through all things that have to do with green fingers and the business of the food that we eat. So if you want to find out more about that, of course, even want to go into the business of food and certainly agriculture, that is a show that you do not want to miss. And on Wednesdays, Esther Clausen brings you the first time home buyer show. She's always in conversation with people who reflect on the first time buying journey, but of course, have gone on to grow their property portfolios from strength to strength. Well, those are the great shows that you can tune into every single weekday at 8 p.m. right here across Private Property's social media pages. Remember to follow us across our social media networks, whether of course you do that on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're also available on TikTok. You can follow myself at Zamantungwa_K on Instagram as well as on Twitter. Now, one of the other great things that you're going to find on our social media pages, more specifically on our Facebook page, is that great competition that we're running, where we get to give away 500 rands in cash every single evening right here on the Private Property Podcast. And all you have to do to stand a chance of walking away with that cash prize is to go to the pinned post on our Facebook page, comment there, let us know what has been some insightful, great advice that you've picked up while watching the show. And if we pick your name out of the thousands who've already commented there, then you walk away with the cash prize. In the event where we don't get a lucky winner, the money goes back into the money bag and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. Our winner, unfortunately, wasn't watching us live. And so I believe we now have 2,000 rands in the money bag. And so I do hope that the lucky winner this evening is going to be watching and can certainly kick off their weekend 2,000 rands richer. Well, one of the things that we're doing this evening that I'm very, very excited about, as you've seen this full week and certainly for next week as well, we're going to be reflecting a lot around the year that was and certainly planning for the upcoming year when it comes to all things relating to property. But because there are different aspects of our property journey, on the one hand, you could be a landlord, you could be a tenant, you could be looking to build, to buy, to sell. Certainly going to be touching on different aspects throughout these last 2-3 weeks as we wrap up 2021. And that's precisely what we're doing this evening. We're looking at 2022 design and renovation trends. I'm joined by none other than Lehlohonolo Khumalo, who's the founder and owner at LK Home. Lehlohonolo, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zamantungwa, and thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. So every time we have you on, I always have to, put the disclaimer that as much as you're a fellow Mtungwa, we are not related, just so people don't think that we're making this a family affair. Although I think both of us know that there's a thing about us Khumalo being everywhere and really being family in the greater scheme of things. And that's certainly something that I know the viewers at home have a deep appreciation for. Now, we've had you on the show for a few times throughout the year talking about different aspects of whether it's design, DIY, and renovation. And I think before we even start looking at 2022, looking at the renovation and design trends, let's first just reflect a bit on the year that was. Perhaps share with us some of the trends that you've picked up and noticed along the past year, and perhaps even some of the needs that your clients had in 2021.
So I think coming from the pandemic, it was the same with 2020 and 2021. A lot of us had to work from home a lot. So we've seen a lot of people invest more in their spaces, whether you're renting or whether you are, excuse me, you're owning a property. People are actually dedicating working from home spaces, or whether it's a room or a space at your kitchen counter. We found that we are spending more time at home, and people either then, be it indoors or outdoors, there's been a lot of work that we've been doing on our houses. And in terms of design, I think minimal became very big. And I think even going forward into 2022, minimal looks like it's here to stay. But I think the one thing that I always talk about is making the space work for you, be it taste or functionality.
If there's somebody who knows how to make minimalism work and does so effortlessly is yourself, I certainly do urge our viewers at home to check out your Instagram page, where you'll get a sense of all the inspiration and some of the great projects that she's working on. That's LK Home DIY on Instagram, and I think one of the great things is you talk a lot about also adding a bit of your own personality. So in as much as you pick up some of these big trends, whether it's minimalism or whatever the trend that's in vogue, you do want to put a bit of personality into your home as much as possible. How can people strike that balance? Because I think they're just people who like seeing pretty things but struggle to duplicate some of that prettiness, where you really strike the balance between the trend that is in season or the trend that appeals to you, but also adding a bit of your personality in ways where it's still aesthetically pleasing to the eye and you still feel like you've hit the nail on the aesthetic that you're gunning for.
I think most of the time I always say easy does it. Sometimes with people that may have the budget to decorate everything all at once, we can do that, especially sometimes if you do hire a professional. But sometimes if you're not a professional and you're sort of just finding your feet as you go along, it can get a bit overwhelming, and you might find that you actually make up some mistakes and you overwhelm your space with things that you later on regret buying or putting in that space or doing to the specific space, whether it's like renovations. So I always say easy does it, and trends come and go. I think find something that works for you. So if it's something you're going to invest 25,000 Rand into a sofa, so even if 5 years from now, boucle material is no longer in style, if it's something that you still love and still works for your space, great. If you've got the leisure of putting in 25,000 Rand every 3 months for a couch into your space, go for it. But I think I always say easy does it, and take your time. And I'm a firm believer in using apps such as Instagram and Pinterest to sort of find your style in terms of identifying what are some of the things that you like and looking at the common threads of all those pictures that you may save and that you may like. And then you sort of slowly kind of identify your style. And then, but always, I think it's at the end of the day, it's your place. There is absolutely no use for you to create this aesthetically pleasing environment, but it doesn't bring you any joy because it is not something that you like. So if it means breaking the rules a little, you're the one person who uses the space the most, go for it.
I'm seeing sort of the love that you're getting on our Facebook page and absolutely loving the conversation there. Ukutso Ramohlale, Bongani Queen B Mabunda, as well as Anelda Everton, Martha Shingange watching there. And I see that the person who would have won yesterday, Tashi Combs, commenting, saying also 45th cousin Zama, referring to, of course, my guest this evening, but also she wasn't watching last night. So her name was the name that we picked up, but unfortunately she didn't watch. And Martha Shinan is saying Tashi Combs Askisi, and of course she comes back saying that that's something that would have absolutely made her weekend. Remember, you want to make sure that you watch us every single day live if you've entered that competition on our Facebook page, because that's the only way you can walk away with that cash prize. You don't want to be like some of our viewers who miss it by a day and certainly miss out on quite a bit of cash. So do make sure that you continuously watch, especially if you have entered that competition. Now, Rona, before we go to a break, I want us to reflect a bit on then some of the mistakes that you saw, some of the design and home renovation projects that you saw people making in 2021 that they absolutely also need to avoid making in 2022.
I think it is knowing your strengths and knowing your areas of development. And sometimes in eagerness to do a project, we take on too much, and it can get overwhelming, and then you leave the project midway, and then you end up being in a space with kitchen cupboards that are halfway painted and you stopped halfway. So sometimes it's knowing if there is something that you know that you're not good at, get a professional if you have to. And I think most of the times, I mean, I also tell some of my clients or people who follow me on my Instagram page will ask me, oh my goodness, we saw you do this paneling. Can you please do it for me, or do you do it for clients? And I will honestly say to you, no, I don't do it for clients, but I can refer to you someone who does. Because the one thing that I know how labor intensive it is, but also for me, I'm not happy with the level of skill that I have that I would do it for somebody else, because it's for me, it's my first time of doing it, but I would rather refer you to a professional. So the same thing for people that choose, especially with DIY projects. If you've got to know your skill level, and if you know that here, I'd rather get in a professional, learn from them, help them where you can, and then just get involved in that way. But I think most of the thing is just knowing your, like, exactly where you know where to relinquish control.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great skill set that you need to have when you're looking, especially at DIY projects, because we get very excited, and especially right now it's the festive season. Some people are going to want to perhaps experiment a little bit because we are at home and we don't have deadlines at the office, and they want to experiment a little bit. So knowing what you're fundamentally good at is so important, because you don't want to start a project where you're going to end up needing to bring in a professional and spending significantly more money for them to fix what you have essentially broken and then thoroughly do the particular project. So it's really important to get a sense of what kind of work are you actually able to do. And if you are venturing into DIY, start small. Don't go wanting to build yourself, your built-in wardrobe, for instance, as your first DIY project. You will fail for the most part, especially if you've never done that kind of stuff. It is very, very intensive. But I want us to go for a quick break, find out who the lucky winner of that 2,000 Rand that is in the money bag this evening is. Hopefully they are watching. They'll have until the end of the show to raise their hand and claim that lucky prize cash money. And of course, when we come back, I'll continue my conversation with Lehlohonolo Khumalo, who's the founder and owner at LK Home. And that lucky winner this evening is Andries Volmerans. Andries Volmerans, 2,000 Rands up for grabs this evening on that competition that we are running. Hope that you're watching it, but until the end of the show to raise your hand and make sure that you claim the cash prize as we continue the conversation with Lehlohonolo Khumalo, looking at 2022 design and renovation trends this evening. And I want to find out from you at home, when we look at the year that was, whether in DIY projects that you did or perhaps in home renovation improvements that you did in your home. And what was the experience like? I know that there are very limited DIY projects that I tend to do, and that's because I'm very pedantic about how I want something to be, and my skill level, as Lehlohonolo said, is not quite there. My skill level is not where I want the thing I want to be like. And so if anything, I'll bring out all the mood board, I'll bring out the mood board and share with the professional that this is what I want done. And certainly going to our Facebook comments, quite a lot of conversation happening there. Menzi Buthelezi watching, Tashi Combs coming back saying she certainly, she says that she actually took painkillers and went to sleep when she found out that she had lost out on the cash prize yesterday. And Samuel Shatsa also watching, Sarah Matetsa saying DIY is the way DIY is the way Pinterest will make you believe or think rather that you are an expert. And that's quite a big one, because I think, you create all these great reports on Pinterest, and the next thing you know, you think you've got a good sense of how to do this, but you really do need to be on top of it as much as possible. Now, Lehlohonolo, when we then reflect on the upcoming year, and we've now had the experience of 18 months of living in a COVID, era, whether it's work from home or some people, unfortunately, were pretty much going to work all the time because of the nature of the work that they do. What are some of the trends, design and renovation trends that you have already sort of seen are going to be big in the new year that viewers at home can be aware of?
I think the biggest thing is sustainability that's coming up, especially in a country like ours, where we are forced to find ways to sort of sustain our electricity, our water. So things like rainwater harvesting for your gardening, and it's simple projects that you can get a professional to come in, and then going off the grid, and like solar power and those kind of little things that are coming in. So we are seeing a shift in that direction. But then the other thing also then, in terms of, like you're saying, working from home, revamping your space, so whether it's clearing a room that wasn't previously used, or finding a room, a space in your house that you are dedicating to working from home. So we're definitely seeing that. But I think also getting that we're looking more at multifunctionality. So a room that probably might be used as a guest bedroom, but you also now have to convert it to a work from home office. So putting something like a sleeper couch during the day, it's just a normal couch. But then should you have guests over, it can also turn into like an additional guest bedroom. So what previously wasn't being used anymore now has to be used more creatively. So you're looking at multifunctional spaces. And then also, I mean, now with COVID, I mean, with social distancing, I think another move that we're also going to see is people now actually are going to be looking at their outdoor spaces. So really now, because some people may prefer to, if they do visit you, that you sit outside. And so things like your braai areas or just like your lapa or your porch kind of areas where you can have outdoor blinds just to shield from the elements, the rain or the sun. So those kind of move in that. And also, like I said, just working from home. So it's just kind of all those elements that are now coming into play.
And I think that, those are actually just such great tips to certainly great insights in terms of trends that we can look forward to for the new year. And I think, when I then look at design and renovation tips, perhaps share some for, firstly, homeowners, because they certainly have a bit more room to play around with their property. And then secondly, for people who are renting, where they're slightly limited in the kinds of things that they can do in the property where they're staying in.
Yeah. So I think for starting off with the renting, I mean, you're looking at people that are taking more control of their space, be rent. So now these are the kind of times where you have open discussion with your landlord, especially when you're looking at a long-term rental, where you say, look, can I do this? Can I paint the walls? Can I put this? So I'm seeing people doing paneling in rental spaces, finding creative ways of then they'll still be able to leave and bring the space back to the original color that they got when they moved into the space. And now looking at homeowners, I think it's more of, I think paneling is coming back. I've spoken a bit about paneling as well. Paneling is coming back. I mean, it was something that I think 5 years ago would be viewed as very dated. It's got a very French antique style, but it is coming back, and there's ways of making it more modern. So especially looking at the color that you use to then paint of it and the style of the paneling that you then do, can be doing that. And I think it's also just using a bit of more color now. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people that are painting their spaces with very muted colors. Like, people are not afraid to use black in a room anymore. And people are using more of very browns and even painting things like painting ceilings. So it's more of exactly how far do you want to go. And I think also looking at a person, let's say, who is owning a sectional title, and in the next 5 to 10 years that you want to probably sell it, you want to also look at something that will not decrease the value of your property. So there's absolutely no use of removing your whole kitchen, and then 5 years later that kitchen is very dated and it brings the property, and that means a person won't be happy to pay the actual value of the property. Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think more often than not, those of us who are homeowners, you tend to overcapitalize a lot on a property that you live in, which is so dangerous, especially in sectional title communities, because what you are able to then sell that property for, especially in a short period of time, is very market dependent. It's a complex. Or in a state, there are other properties that are very similar to yours. And so having top end finishes that, you spend quite a significant amount of money for, the next person who may want to buy that property may not have an appreciation, firstly, for the nature of the finishes, and certainly may not have an appreciation for how much you've paid for it. So you can't suddenly, charge 80,000, 100,000 rands more for your property because that's how much you paid for your kitchen. So understanding those numbers becomes so crucial, especially if you've bought and you're going to sell in a relatively short period of time, because you'll end up losing out. You're actually not going to be able to recover your money, because the other comparative, properties or comparable properties rather, are going to be going for substantially less than your property. So that's certainly something that you need to be aware of at home. And when we then look at, any tips for people who are going to be working with professionals? Because I've already said earlier that certain projects you're going to want to bring in a professional. It's not something that you should be, doing yourself. The majority of home renovation projects you're going to be working with some or other contractor. Any tips for viewers at home when it comes to finding the right contractor, working with them, and of course making sure that they get what they have paid for?
Yes, I think the best thing for me is always do your due diligence. So don't take on the first contractor that you land on. Do your research, get your quotes, and really be involved. I mean, depending on your availability in terms of how much of your time can you actually dedicate. So if ever you're a very busy person and you just want the finished product and you don't really care, you want to hand out the project totally over to the person, by all means. But I think, especially if we're looking at a budget, sometimes it even works out cheaper where if ever, let's say you want to get tiles done, that you say, listen, I'll buy all the material and I'll go and get it myself. And then I just need you for labor services. So then it just works out much better. And you organize all of it. And the contract that comes in just comes in for the labor part of the project. And that's it. And I think also but if there's one thing, and I think we tend to underestimate the amount of money that actually goes into a renovation or a project.
Yeah.
I always say over budget for it. If you think you're going to spend 100K, I would say like even 120 to 130 even, because something always happens where either things just don't work out or there's a shortage of this and they need that. And there's just all these things that pop up. So I always say over budget. But the other thing is just have a very clear and open discussions with your contractors and be very, I think most of the times is people make the mistake of keeping quiet. And once the contractor then leaves, then it's like, I'm not happy about this. And you end up bad mouthing the person. But I think just have those open and honest conversations and very early on set the tone from the beginning to say, this is what I want, and be very open and honest. If you're not happy about certain things that are happening, especially with a long-term project, that the person knows and you're able to fix it early on, because the further you go down the line, the more expensive it becomes. And then you're not happy and then you end up spending more money than you need to.
And I think that's one of the big ones that we sometimes don't often do, that speak early. You don't want to see somebody building off, and this has happened to me, and I'm saying it, part of me is kind of kicking myself. One of the properties we're doing a tiling project, and tiling project is such an easy thing. I've done it countless times. And with this particular property, they didn't square the room properly. So they didn't square the property properly. So they had to, square it from the entrance. They squared it from the middle of the property, and you do not do that at all. And, when they started tiling, then they went into the bedrooms, which just became very dismal. And by the time you were in the lounge, it was absolutely terrible. Luckily, I was able to get them to, take out the tiles in the lounge, and I think the bathroom and the passage, but the bedrooms, unfortunately, are not properly squared. So when you look down, it looks slightly skew, but you're able to get away with it only because it is the bedrooms. Now, I'm seeing some of the love and the great engagement on our Facebook page. Andres Bolmarans is indeed watching. Congratulations to you. That cash prize is coming your way. Absolutely love that you're watching us. And of course, we're able to claim your prize. Omenzi Butelezi saying, don't drill holes if you're renting, rather use alternative mounting options. And that's a very big one, because your landlord can charge you for essentially the damage that you're going to cause from drilling. In the event where the alternative methods do not work, first get consent from your landlord. I found that there are landlords who are open to drilling. I've been open to some drilling in some of the properties where I know that it can actually sustain that. And, once you get out and a new tenant comes in, we're able to put some polyfiller and, we're good to go. but not every wall, unfortunately, lends itself well to that kind of replacement. Martha Shingani asking, any tips for wallpapering? I think that's going to be my festive holiday project. So people doing wallpaper, any tips for them?
So with wallpaper, I think it depends a lot on the actual design of the wallpaper. So if you've got a very intricate pattern that requires a lot of aligning and is very technical, I would rather say leave it to the professionals. So especially like those very big designs of a flower that spans across the whole walls but comes in different panels, I would really say to get your money's worth, get a professional. But for a DIY project, I think wallpapering is very fun. I would say do your research a lot, watch a lot of YouTube videos on the technique, and preparation is key. Make sure your surface is really well cleaned, prepare your surface properly, and make sure that you have all the right tools. And it can actually be really fun. And I mean, if ever you get a very simple pattern that's very easy to align, it can be very fun. And I think also part of the thrill of DIY projects is just having that pride that you did something and it turned out great in your space.
And I think, I mean, when I think about wallpapering or wall features, because you've done incredible wall features, more than once, and sometimes even upgraded a previous version, there is that pride, the hard work that you kind of put in. And when you're doing it, of course, in your primary residence, you're also always coming back home realizing that I did that. Like, I'm the one who actually worked on that particular wall. Some of the comments coming through, Teko Mkhubudi saying there's this new interior design trend of kitchen cabinet wrapping. My mind is still shocked of this trend. I wonder though how durable it can be. I've seen this trend. Absolutely mind-blowing. The kitchen looks transformed. I mean, they literally can take what looks like an old kitchen and make it seem like it's a new gloss high-end kitchen. There's a lady that I know who does it, and the work that she's done that I've seen has been really, really impressive. So I think, I don't know about the durability, but certainly from what I've seen so far, it looks absolutely amazing. Sarah Mateta saying, nowadays labor is expensive, even if you use your own materials. We are paying for manicures. And she goes on to say, December times people charge a lot. Any tips there when it comes to, looking at the price point? Because I think that's certainly one of the things that we're very conscious of this year. Everything has gone up. We've got interest rate hikes, we've got electricity hikes and rates hikes, we've got petrol going up. So I think we're very price conscious on everything, and we want to be able to bring down costs as much as possible. Any tips when it comes to the negotiating the labor price? Because you also don't want to put somebody out of business. I think that's also a thing that we must always bear in mind when we talk about price sensitivity and negotiating for a better rate.
And exactly that. I mean, here you are most likely dealing with a small business. I mean, this person just needs the business as much as you need the service. And the one thing that we need to be very careful of is not to sacrifice quality because of cost. My mother always says, cheap koop is duur koop. So you might sacrifice on the labor costs and get a very inexperienced person that might be a chancer, and because of price you went with them and you end up having to spend more. So I think it's finding that fine balance in between quality and price. And I mean, like even with the kitchen wrapping, I mean, if ever you can get durable materials, instead of getting a kitchen right now, let's say you spend a few $1,000 just to transform it up until the time where you actually have enough money saved up for the actual kitchen that you do want. So I think it's just patience, but then also just achieve that fine balance of between price and quality.
The last one here, Martha Shinani is saying, thanks to Lehlohonolo, I'm ready to have expert fun. We'll be checking out your IG again. Absolutely love that. Now, Lehlohonolo, as we wrap up this evening, any final tips for our viewers at home when it comes to all things design and renovation for 2022?
Again, I think I sound like a broken record, but I think it's your space, your rules, and trends come and go. And I think one of the fun things and one of the things that I enjoy myself, especially with my place, is I get to change, do inexpensive projects to just keep on changing my place the way that I feel. So with things like paint, go ahead, change it every 6 months, every year, or however long you want it. So definitely, but I think the main thing is that it's your space. Do what works for you and how you use the space and how much it'll give you the most out of that specific space.
And we're going to leave it there. It's your space, it's your rules, so do make sure that you make it as friendly as possible. Lehlohonolo, thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.
Thank you for having me. Have a lovely evening.
And that is Lehlohonolo Khumalo, who's a founder and owner at LK Home, wrapping up the Friday edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Zamantungwa Khumalo. It's been a great week, and I do hope that many of you are certainly slowly gearing up for the end of the year. As I said earlier this week, we are planning a really great show to wrap up 2021 and absolutely excited to roll it out. We will be communicating this across our social media platforms, so do watch out for those announcements. And of course, from hearing a thing or two about it from us with the private property team. Well, that's it for myself as Zamantungwa Khumalo. It's been a really great week. I'll be back on your screens on Monday evening at 7 p.m. Of course, we look forward to the Home Shoppers Show with Chad later on at 8 p.m. Until then, hope you're staying home and staying safe.